Our second reading, our reading from the Hebrew Scriptures this morning, is taken from the book of Genesis. Genesis chapter 1, beginning at verse 1, the whole way to chapter 2 and verse 4. Now, I'm going to skip some of the verses along the way because it's quite long. But it's a beautiful thing to hear this story all in one reading. And so I would invite you, if you're not following in your pew Bible, maybe to close your eyes. This is an imaginative reading, and use your imaginations, and I promise I won't think you're sleeping as you hear this reading from Genesis chapter 1. In the beginning, when God created the heavens and the earth was a formless void, and darkness covered the face of the deep, while a wind from God swept over the face of the waters. Then God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. And God saw that the light was good. And God separated the light from the darkness. God called the light day, and the darkness God called night. And there was evening and there was morning the first day. And God said, "Let there be a dome in the midst of the heavens, in the midst of the waters, and let it separate the waters from the waters." God called the dome sky. And there was evening and there was morning the second day. And God said, "Let the waters under the sky be gathered together in one place, and let dry land appear." And it was so. God called the dry land earth, and the waters that were gathered together God called the seas. And God saw that it was good. And God said, "Let the earth put forth vegetation, plants yielding seed, and fruit trees of every kind on earth that bear fruit with seed in it." And it was so. And God saw that it was good. And there was evening and there was morning the third day. And God said, "Let there be lights in the dome of the sky to separate day from night." And it was so. And God saw that it was good. And there was evening and there was morning the fourth day. And God said, "Let the waters bring forth swarms of living creatures, and let birds fly above the earth across the dome of the sky." And God saw that it was good. And there was evening and there was morning the fifth day. And God said, "Let the earth bring forth living creatures of every kind." And it was so. And God saw that it was good. Then God said, "Let us make humankind in our image, according to our likeness." So God created humankind in God's image. In the image of God, God created them. Male and female, God created them. God blessed them and said to them, "Be fruitful and multiply, and fill the earth and subdue it." God saw everything that God had made, and indeed it was very good. And there was evening and there was morning the sixth day. Thus the heavens and the earth were finished, and all their multitude. And on the seventh day, God finished the work that God had done. And God rested on the seventh day from all the work that God had done. So God blessed the seventh day and hallowed it. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Well, it's a pleasant story, isn't it? It's kind of poetic, it's kind of insightful. It has a few lines that repeat throughout it, which is a nice mnemonic device. It's not at all controversial or anti-science, as we've heard it depicted. Of course, some people do think that this story is literal scientific fact, but if you read Genesis 1 with nothing to prove, you can see at a glance this was never meant to be science here. This is a song, it's a parable, it's a poem. It's a creative telling of things that just can never really be told. Incidentally, it does get at least one scientific fact right. The fact that life began in the oceans, that's interesting. But there's something else that it gets quite right. Did you notice that the God in this story, the Creator, is almost jolly? How happy this God is, and how self-congratulatory this God is. They just can't get over how good everything is turning out. They just can't get over it. And on Trinity Sunday, at least, I think I can use they, them pronouns for God. God makes the sun and the moon, and oh, that's good. And God makes the sky, and oh, that's good. God makes humanity in God's image, and that, as the text says, indeed is very good. The best thing of all. Here is a joyful God who delights in creating and making things of beauty, things of worth. And part of what it means to be created in the image of this joyful, creative God is to find our joy also in creating. In creating. Over the long weekend, last weekend, Michelle and I celebrated our 19th anniversary. I don't know how it happens. Maybe we only celebrate the prime numbers. For some reason, some years we just go out to dinner or we just say happy anniversary. Other years we catch a bargain cruise to Mexico, and that's what we did this year. We went to Mexico, and it was wonderful. I had never been to Mexico before, and so we had to hit some of the touristy things, mariachi bands. Mariachi, listen to me. Folk dancers, open-air markets where they sold sombreros and ponchos to tourists, and statues, lots of statues. The Virgin of Guadalupe, statues of the saints, and another statue that has become very popular in Mexico and in North America in recent years, the skeletal lady that I've told you about once before, called Santa Muerta. I hope I got that right, Mary. Or Holy Death, or Saint Death. I'm interested, as you probably know, in folk religion, in syncretism. And I've been curious about what is said to be the fastest growing religion in North America, namely the worship of Saint Death, Santa Muerta, this skeleton. She's a Mexican folk saint, depending on who you ask, or maybe a goddess. That depends. And she's worshipped mainly by the desperately poor, by those who have no hope, by criminals, by marginalized people who have given up on the Roman Catholic Church, finding it too judgmental of their lives. People often who have to make a living doing things that good old Mother Mary would never approve of. Prostitutes, pickpockets, drug dealers, assassins. Santa Muerta is popular with the drug cartels, but also the persecuted gay community in Mexico venerates Santa Muerta. Why? Because death doesn't judge. Death welcomes everybody in time. Santa Muerta may be based on the ancient Aztec goddess of death and of the dead, with elements of Spanish Catholicism mixed in and a generous dose of the Grim Reaper. She's a skeleton, all dressed in robes, holding a pair of scales and a scythe, which apparently is a sickle with a long handle. I had to get a statue of Santa Muerta. I had to. I know she's an idol, but for me it's just a piece of Mexican folk art to bring home as a souvenir. Does anybody remember that old episode of the Brady Bunch where the Bradys go to Hawaii and Bobby finds an evil tiki idol, which he keeps, and it starts to cause bad luck? Alice is dancing and she throws her back out. And so he tries to return the idol to the ancient burial ground where it belongs, where he's held hostage by an archaeologist. Archaeologists, I tell you. Michelle reminded me of that episode of the Brady Bunch when I lovingly bundled up my Santa Muerta to bring her home. Here I was, carrying an idol that is worshipped by sometimes cold-blooded murderers who ask her to bless their bullets so that they will go straight to the brains and hearts of their enemies. Some pray to this saint or this goddess, whatever you call her, for revenge and for the death of their enemies. But others pray to her because they believe that she's the only one listening, that she's the only one who cares to hear the likes of them. Death makes no moral demands. Death welcomes all. She does not love, but unlike some people's God, she does not hate either. Many fear her and few welcome her, but she's not evil. Death isn't evil exactly. She's the great equalizer. And happy are those who make their peace with her. What does it say about our faith, about Christianity? If people today would rather have a God of non-judgment than the supposed God of love that our lives are supposed to proclaim, but sometimes don't. This skeletal, shadowy statue, and I was going to bring her in to show you, but I just couldn't bring her into the church. This skeletal, shadowy statue is someone's idea of God, someone's image of God. And as Voltaire famously said, God created us in God's image, and we have been returning the favor ever since. All our images of this mystery called God are incomplete, they're insufficient, they're inconclusive, they're paltry. They show just one or two things about God. I mean, what are you looking for in a God? Non-judgment, love? What are you looking for? Whatever you say about God, there's always more to say, and maybe less. Maybe we should just shut up. That would put me out of business. Any statue or painting of God, any God, will only depict a small part of the divine fullness. And among those things is certainly death, but there's also life and mystery and awe, wonder, love, power, weakness, humility, beauty, grace, creativity. Creativity, being created in God's image, means sharing creative powers with the power that we name God. Today is known as Trinity Sunday. We don't always make a very big deal of it. It's always the Sunday right after Pentecost. And after today, all of our Sundays will go back to getting lazy names until the end of November. It'll be like those streets in New York where the city planners just kind of ran out of imagination. Their creativity ran out and they started naming them after letters and numbers. Our Sundays will get names like Pentecost 5A, Pentecost 6A. I long ago gave up preaching sermons about the Trinity. We deal with it in confirmation class, and if you really want to, we can deal with it in adult ed. Let's just say about the Trinity that we understand God as we understand ourselves in three parts: mind, heart, and body. It's interesting in this reading from Genesis that God refers to God's self as us. Did you catch that? God calls God's self us, and the Hebrew word for God is actually plural. It's Elohim, gods. But then, just to throw you for a loop, they give you singular verbs to go with the plural noun. For example, God's is good. God's rules the world. God's makes humankind in God's image. It's kind of like listening to Gollum from The Lord of the Rings. But if we're not doing somersaults with our language, maybe we're not treating the mystery of God with as much awe and reverence as we should. Let's turn to this famous claim that God creates humankind in the image of God's. You know, I used to say years ago that language is the proof, because I love language. Language is the proof that we are created in God's image. Only humans have language. That was wrong. I have learned since that there's all manner of language in this world. We're discovering that even the trees speak to each other under the earth through their complicated systems of roots. You might say that our capacity to love is what puts us squarely in the image of God. And perhaps it does, but don't other creatures love as well? Doesn't your cat try to love you in its regal, scornful, cat-like kind of way? You could say that human logic is what makes us to be in the image of God. But beavers are pretty logical, aren't they? Beavers know exactly where and how to fell a tree to create their dams and their dens. They're engineers. Is it our imaginations that mean that we are created in God's image? That we are uniquely godlike? Maybe. But isn't a bird using its imagination when it says, hey, honey, look here. The top of this window would be perfect for our nests. Because it'll be right under the eave where there's no rain and there's no sun. We would stay dry, we would stay cool. And just imagine, that scornful cat couldn't get us up here. Couldn't judge us. If a dog flinches when you make a sudden movement, you know something sad about that dog's life. But isn't that dog kind of imagining what you might do to it? These could be God's characteristics at work in all of life. Imagination, language, love, logic. And yet, what being other than God and humans creates just for the joy of creating? Is there any creature that creates just for joy, not for any reason, but for the love of it? Paintings, songs, dances, stories, bouquets of flowers, quilts, scrimshaw, needlepoint, tiramisu. What do you create? Are there creatures that do this other than us? I mean, sure, a wood thrush makes its evening song, and there is no music lovelier. But you know, when you hear a bird song, it usually means one of two things. It means, hey, Buster, get out of my territory. This is my tree. This is my area right here. Or else it means, hey, ladies, I'm free tonight. The ants of the African savanna build these beautiful towers that dot the arid plains. They're red and they're tall and they're shaped like cones. But they only build them for security and for protection and for shelter. Rare is the queen ant who says, hey, give me an icon there on that wall. Give me a mural. Let's put up some prints. When society ceases to be creative, when it ceases to invest in beauty for beauty's sake, when it stops building bridges like the 16th Street Bridge, my favorite bridge in the city, with its globes and its water horses and its bright yellow color and its majestic arches, and instead it merely builds bridges that get the job done because we want them to be cheap. And money, after all, is kind of our main priority. Then we've slipped a little away from our godlike humanity and become just a little bit more like the animals. Our society is so driven by greed and base desires that we lose track of our need for creativity, for play, for beauty. You know, even at Auschwitz, people were writing poems and plays. Humans are like plants. We will always reach for the light. We will always reach for the divine. We will always reach for God in whatever way we can, be it Santa Muerta or be it the God that we see in Jesus Christ. Our human creativity restores to us our godlikeness. It makes us better. That's why there's such a thing as art therapy. Art therapy. We had a member of this church at one time who designed these beautiful altar cloths, the paraments, and who sewed them, who always insisted, if you remember her, everyone is an artist. Everyone. I've known some people who would say, no, not me. In fact, I knew a lady who said that. No, I don't like art. I don't like art at all. She was down to earth. She was practical. But give her a needle and some thread, she was an artist. She could do things with a needle and thread that not many could do. It wasn't my kind of art, but it was her kind of art. And that's what matters. Surely God is many things, not just one. And it means many things to be created in God's image. But one important thing that it means for each and every human being is to find our creativity, to find our joy through creating. We create for the joy of it. It's part of what makes us human. And we can never, I don't believe, be fully joyful without some kind of creativity in our lives. Doesn't matter how you get there. It could be with the garden hoe. It could be with a spatula. It could be with a pen. It could be with a paintbrush. It could be with the piano or the carving knife, just to name a few, a very few. It doesn't matter how you get there, but each person created in God's image is born to create, born to be a creator. We will be ordaining a new elder in a few moments, and we will be swearing in a returning deacon, and we will ask them both to serve the people of God with energy, imagination, intelligence, and love. Energy, imagination, intelligence, and love. That's a pretty good definition of creativity, isn't it? Energy, imagination, intelligence, and love. Let's embrace God's image of us, and let us be people who create. Amen.